Finally. Hey guys, and welcome to my first Final Thoughts video. In our Final Thoughts videos at the end of each blind playthrough of games that we have, I'm going to go over how the game has impacted me, what I thought of the game, and just kind of general opinions on how the game was handled, both from a story perspective and from a gameplay perspective. This is not going to be an actual review of the game per se. I'm not assigning scores. I'm not giving some kind of a gradient, a result scale of some sort to go by. This is just me kind of going back over everything that I've done. Gonna go ahead and tell you ahead of time, there will be spoilers. So if you have not played this game or have watched me play through this game, I highly recommend you back out of this video and either watch an actual review of the game, and actual thoughts on the game that are spoiler free, like with some other live streamers, let's players, and the like. So if you don't want to be spoiled on the game, please go and read or watch a review of some sort instead of watching this video, because I promise you will probably see or hear something that is going to be unpleasantly spoilery. So let's go ahead and put up a disclaimer before we jump in. Reminder that I have no experience with the World of Darkness outside of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. So remember, any observations or opinions you get from me in the later part of this video, please take them all with a grain of salt. Again, I'm not that familiar with the actual setting of the World of Darkness tabletop RPG, so some of what I'm talking about may have some sort of resolution. By all means, you can go ahead and correct that down in the comments below if you don't mind. Just don't rage quit the video because I am saying something really dumb. It's not that I'm stupid, it's that I'm ignorant. The good news is, whereas stupid cannot be fixed, ignorance can with education. So please go ahead and let me know what I missed down below. Okay, so our Final Thoughts video is going to be broken up into 3 sections, which should remain consistent across all Final Thoughts videos. We're going to go over world building and immersion, gameplay, and lasting impression of the game itself. So, let's get a little deeper then, shall we? Moving to world building and immersion. We're going to break this down to a few bullet points here, so let's go ahead and take a look at these points. First of all, with regards to world building and immersion, let's look at the clans of this game. Now, the clan system is brilliant, honestly, and I know it's been borrowed from the tabletop RPG, but in addition to giving your character several different loadouts with your disciplines based on your clan, it also has a story-driven focus regarding how you choose your clan. It changes how other characters perceive you. It changes sometimes just the general population's observation of you, aka a Nosferatu. You gotta go in the sewers and escape everybody that way instead. Or Malkavian, where you're going to get voices in your head, and it's going to just completely change your dialogue options. That's amazing that they've added that in as an option with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Those clans are fantastic. Also, for the actual immersion portion of the clans, they all have unique backstories. They're all over, and there are other clans that I know that have been brought up in the comments that I actually have not encountered. So I know they're out there, and I know there are lots more clans, and they all have their own flavor to how they perceive the world as a group. And sometimes that changes geographically. It goes across the United States. You might find a couple different people with the Camarilla or the Anarchs that are completely different with their leadership because of what clan they come from. It's very unique, and I really do appreciate that. Now, moving on to more of the world building and immersion part, we're looking at emails. So one of the first emails I encountered was some spam about penis enlargement. That was unique and amazing. I was not expecting spam to come into emails at all. That was unexpected, and again, like I said, it was just fantastic. I really enjoyed the dark humor that it plugged into the game from the start for you, basically. So in addition to this kind of, mysterious email talking about how someone has made the move in a chess game, you also get to hear about Kilpatrick's crime pewter and, male enhancement drugs. It just hits a little too on the nose for it to be taken seriously, and I really enjoyed it. Now, the downside of emails is that a lot of these side quests were delegated almost entirely to emails. The biggest one I can think of right now is Gary Golden. You have the option of finding these different items for Gary, but every time you find the item, you have to mail it from your apartment and then get back on the computer and get his next quest. It was really annoying, especially if you had multiple items with you already. You had to accept the quest at the computer, go downstairs, mail the item, leave, come back, go back upstairs, check your computer, get your next thing, and rinse and repeat. It was really annoying, and I hated those fetch quests. There were other side quests that were delegated that way as well. I know there's a werewolf blood one that I'm remembering off the top of my head for LaCroix that required you to go somewhere else and turn it in the mail and all that fun stuff. But no, I really don't like that. I didn't like the whole fetch quest aspect being put into email form because it takes away from the, shall we say, the personality of the game. Because if you look at the other major fetch quests that were in the game, the biggest one I could think of was Pisha. Now Pisha had you recovering 2 different items, but it wasn't delegated to email form. So Pisha would actually talk to you, give you some insight into her character and who she is, even though you didn't get a whole lot of it, and then gave you these 2 fetch quests to do. So you go find these items throughout the game and then bring them back to her, and she would talk to you about it some more. That was much more immersive than just going to an email, sticking something in your mailbox and getting a response saying, "Hey, thanks for that, fledgling, here's some more stuff for you to find." That was not fun. I did not enjoy that at all. And in fact, what would have really helped? I've seen them around the city, so it's not like they don't have them. But why the hell do no vampires carry cell phones? Don't you think they would be much more productive using cell phones? I mean, I know Gary Golden actually uses payphones to reach out to you, and I know there's been a couple other things where you've used payphones in quests to get in touch with other people, but why don't we have cell phones? Is it that vampires don't keep up with the times? I mean, is it literally just like they won't use phones until like 2100 before they finally go, "Oh, I guess this phone thing's here to stay," and then they're going to finally use phones? I don't know. I really think it would have been handled a whole lot better. A lot of that would have been a lot more engaging as well, because you'd actually be conversing with someone on the cell phone instead of just getting information put in your face. Well, that's it for emails regarding the world building. Let's move on to characters. Now, the characters are a bit mixed. I really liked some characters, and I didn't much care for others. For example, LaCroix I thought was a fantastic character. I wanted to punch him in the face over and over and over, but he was a good character. I enjoyed his motivations. I enjoyed the fact that he was convinced that he knew it was best for all the kindred. That's good. You need a villain like that, a villain who thinks they know what's best and then pursues it. A one-dimensional villain just goes, "Mwahaha, I will kill everyone because I am evil," is extremely boring and really just not anything that belongs in a heavy RPG setting like this. The other 2 characters I want to mention that I think were great were Jack and Nines. So Jack was one of those characters who I really never really knew what direction he was going. And not for the lack of him talking or like telling me about what's going on. He just kind of never really committed in any one direction for me to catch on. And that is traditionally Jack, apparently, because you learn a lot about Jack from other people. Everybody else talks about Jack, but Jack does not talk about himself. So you hear how Jack is kind of just a vagrant spirit that comes and goes, but is definitely an anarch, but marches to his own beat. That tells me a lot about Jack. And you know what? It aligns really well with what happens in the end of the game, where, you know, he actually goes in and sets up an assassination for LaCroix. That is perfectly aligned with Jack's pseudo chaotic personality. But at the same time, he's very devoted to the Anarch's cause and hates the Camarilla. That really made me appreciate Jack as a character. And finally, Nines, well, he has his own problems, but he's also a straight arrow. He knows exactly what he wants. He knows exactly what he needs. He was only in the game for maybe about an hour and a half of actual gameplay. But you know what? He was a good representative of the Anarch leadership. And I did really appreciate him representing them in such a way that was believable. Especially with his background, where he had explained that this is why I do what I do. And I appreciate that. And then later on, when he takes on the werewolf and apparently survives, you know, that was one of those things where when Nines reappeared at the very end, and I realized that I was thankful that he was there, that told me that Nines had definitely made more of an impact on me than a lot of other characters in the game. And who are those characters? Well, just for a few, let's talk about Damsel. Despite her voice actor, which I love her so much, she was basically just a Cammy hater. She hated the Camarilla, and she was just there to make sure that you knew the Anarchs hate the Camarilla. She was also there as a plot device to point you toward Nines, which I hate that. I hate characters who become nothing but plot devices, because it undermines their personalities and their characters and who they are. In a game that's called a mechanic, that's not called an NPC or a character. And if you move a character into a category of mechanic, you're pretty much stripping that character of any investment that the player has for that character. I'm just very disappointed with how Damsel was handled, and she's honestly kind of forgettable to me. She's very one-dimensional, and I don't like that at all. The other two I wanted to mention that I did not care much for, Pisha and Sebastian Bach. So the issue with Pisha is that she was basically a quest giver. She had some really enigmatic dialogue to go through, and you kind of got a glimpse at what kind of a clan she might be from. But at the same time, she had literally zero impact on the plot of the game at all. In fact, you can go through the entire game, as far as I'm aware, without actually coming across her, because she doesn't come up in anything. So you can easily just miss her entirely and never know she was in the game, and that's disappointing. Very disappointing. Also the fact that she's just so insular that what I did for her felt like it was nothing. Honestly, if I knew that her voice actor was not who she is, then I would have started suspecting that she was something that was put in with the unofficial patch or the fan-made stuff. Because honestly, she doesn't touch the plot at all of the game. She's just there to give you a couple fetch quests, give you a little bit of insight, and be really weird looking and cool at the same time. I didn't enjoy that at all. And then moving on to Bach. Bach was essentially just kind of a boss. He showed up at the end of the mansion with Grout, and he's just like, "Oh no, you did the job I was supposed to do, rawr!" And you're just kind of like, "Okay, bye, you set the place on fire, that's a mechanic." And then near the end of the game, he shows up again with a sniper rifle, and then you have to take him out. And that's it. That's literally it. For setting this guy up to be some kind of an arch nemesis to LaCroix, he was just so boring. I mean, arch nemesis, they should be a lot more involved in that. I mean, look at Batman and Joker. I mean, both of those characters are extremely nuanced. I know they're a lot more involved, and they've built up a lot more over time with the comics and the movies, of course, and games, I guess. But when you're an actual arch nemesis type character, there has to be a hook as to why exactly they are nemesis. As far as we're aware, LaCroix has killed the Lion several times now. That's the only reason. But it relegates Bach to kind of a revenge plot that doesn't really go anywhere. And it's really just kind of sad. But yeah, those characters are the best and the worst that I saw in the game, outside of your just kind of no-name, not interesting NPCs inside. They're just there for flavor. Voice acting was all over the place. The main cast was incredible. The rest of it was okay. You can tell that there was some filler in here. It was just not that great. Oh, one character that I really, really appreciate, even though he was not a main character, but he was still very, very interesting. Vandal Cleaver. That guy had almost no development of his personality. He was just a ghoul that constantly just creeped me the hell out. But you know what? Because of that creepiness, because of the voice acting, because of his just total selling of what he is and how much of a maniac he is, I actually liked him a lot. I hated him, but I liked him. If that makes sense. Like, that was really well handled. I did enjoy I enjoyed Vandal a lot. Now, lastly about the characters, basically all of the human characters in the game were pretty dull. Honestly, not surprising and almost appropriate, because from the player's eyes, they're all kind. They're all the cattle out there just waiting for slaughter. As a vampire, you don't really pay attention to what they're doing out there in the field. So why would you care about what their problems are, what their issues are? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that the human characters would be fairly flat and one-dimensional. So I was appreciative of that. Moving on to the environment. The World of Darkness, of course, takes place mainly at night because we're vampires. But thankfully, because we were in a major city, there's plenty of nightlife, and there was nothing in the game that I can remember specifically where something was placed in a way that felt unnatural. Like, there wasn't anywhere where they put something in a way that made you go, oh, it's here because the game won't let me do this, or the developers didn't want me to go there. No, I'm not. I mean, there may have been a couple things here and there that was like a fence, but that was about it. Otherwise, everything felt normal, natural. It was actually fantastic. I was impressed. Then lastly, moving on to music. The music was good for the game. I mean, it was mostly atmospheric, but very, very few tracks have any memorable melodies, which makes me really sad as a musician myself. I just, man, when you come off of JRPGs that have these sweeping scores of very memorable themes, and you go into Vampire and you get like 2 or 3 of them, that's about it. It's kind of a bummer. I do wish there was a little more involved, but everything was appropriate for the atmosphere. I just wish that we had some music that would stick in my head a lot better. The hub themes do pretty well. Hollywood sticks in my head a lot. Bum 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 ba-dum ba-da-dum bum. That theme sticks in my head really, really well. But that's pretty much it. And it does look like, I think, what is it? Troika Games, White Wolf, whomever developed it, they seem to have pulled a lot of copywritten music into their game. Whether to keep it relevant or not, I don't know. But I do know that a lot of the videos that I posted actually had a little mark on it whenever I uploaded it, telling me there was copywritten material in there. Not an impact to me, since, you know, I don't have any intention of monetizing anything. But I just noticed that there is a lot of copywritten works in here, which means they probably just straight up purchased it and placed it in the game. They did have a composer, but he only did a handful of music. Kind of bummed that that's all we did, but considering the state of the game upon release, I'm not surprised. So again, music appropriate, if a little wanting. Okay, this moves us over to gameplay, the second pillar of this Final Thoughts video. So, questing. Let's talk about that. Quests were updated frequently with a notice, which was nice. I did appreciate the fact that every time something was changed in my quest log, it notified me. The good news is that most of these quests were enjoyable. That was even better. I mean, I've already mentioned the fetch quests for Gary that were just not great. It's not good at all. But the majority of the rest of the quests were fantastic. My favorite quest of the entire game was the quest to find Lily back in Santa Monica. I think it was just because it was about a couple of people in love, and I kind of have a soft spot for romances, so I do appreciate that. But that was my favorite quest. Overall, though, the quests were fantastic, and I did enjoy the suspense and in some cases the outright horror aspect of some of those quests. Unfortunately, that comes to combat now. So, combat. Now, everybody agrees, for the most part, that the combat of this game is kind of rough. A lot of rough, actually. And in fact, it was probably the most suffered part of the game at this point, even after patching. So, ranged and melee are very different animals in this game. An issue I have with the two of them is that depending on which one you're using, you have a perspective change. When using melee, you automatically switch to third person, which is okay, but not when most of the game is spent in first person and is most effectively played in first person. Also, it doesn't help that ranged actually has an option, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, to actually use a first or third person combat style. I wish that you had that option with melee as well. Elder Scrolls had first person combat just fine with melee. I really wish they had had the chance to adopt that style of melee combat. If they had the time and they weren't rushed to deliver this, maybe. I don't know. But basically, combat is, well, basic. There's no real depth to it. There's nothing fancy about it. What you see is what you get, for better or for worse. It served its purpose. However, we're going to move on to skills. So the good news is that boosting your combat skills made combat more tolerable. Things got more interesting. You were seeing bigger numbers. You were more fluid in your combat choices as you played the game, which made things a little bit better. Still did not change the fundamental flaws of the combat system, but I do appreciate what skills could bring to it. I also enjoyed how stats worked in it, where you got experience points and you slotted those points into your stats. That was nice. That was nice. I enjoyed that a lot, actually. Especially the part where the main stats would feed into the secondary stats. Like increasing your strength would also apply to your melee and your unarmed, or whatever it was, brawl. I did enjoy that as well. That means that increasing your main stats would sometimes be more efficient than straight up increasing your secondaries. More expensive, but overall less expensive than individual increases. I did like that. It made it feel like your character was actually growing. The social aspects that opened up with higher skills was awesome as well. I enjoyed the ability to persuade a lot of people to tell me things or believe me when they wouldn't otherwise do so. There is no dice rolling going on in the background like in, say, KOTOR or other games based on D&D, and I don't know what the World of Darkness has for these kinds of dice rolls, or if there are dice rolls for it. I do wish there was a little more variable to it. Like, you still have the option to try to persuade or try to dominate, and then have just a very low chance of success, or a 0 chance of success for that matter. And you just have to have a certain level in order to be more reliable with it, or for it to automatically work. That would be nice. And lastly, with skills, I didn't like the research feat at all. I did not enjoy the fact that the research feat made it a requirement in order to get those skill point bonuses. That was very annoying, to be honest. If they had instead required you to have a certain level of a skill in order to understand the book, that would make more sense. Because I'll be honest, my ability to understand material is in no way related to my ability to understand, say, quantum physics. No matter how much you try to tell me about, quantum physics, I'm going to have no idea what you're talking about. So a general researchness skill is not going to tell me that. But having points in physics would give me a better chance of understanding what the heck quantum physics are. And I know that's not an exact good representation, but essentially if a book is telling me about advanced like Tai Chi moves, it would make sense that someone who has a higher brawl ability would probably be like, oh, okay, I see how that influences what I already know and informs that ability. Let me go ahead and use this and I get an extra point. That would make sense. But the idea of just having general research, like, I know more stuff, therefore I can be better with my fists, that doesn't make sense. So I don't like that skill at all, and I wish it would really go away. Well, this brings us to disciplines, the last thing I want to talk about in my gameplay section. So disciplines were a lot of fun, however, they do trivialize later game encounters. Basically, for me, I just slap presence on and I'm mowing down enemies. Bosses were tougher because they were less influenced by it and made me work harder. But overall, disciplines at later game, especially when it's a higher rank, it just makes it go from medium difficulty down to easy, which was a bummer. You would think that enemies would scale a little bit more. Disciplines were also great when they worked, but a lot of times there'd be some weird glitching that happens. I didn't appreciate that, especially with presence. There were times where I'd have enemies get freaked out by my presence and run out of a room, but they would disappear. They would literally run through the wall and disappear off the map, when I'd have to kill them in order to move on. Ran into that quite regularly with the Mandarin, which was really frustrating. But when it worked, the disciplines were actually fantastic to use. It's a lot of fun. And just for the record, Blood Buff is super OP. And honestly, I think it breaks the game quite a bit. Kinda wish they didn't have Blood Buff. Or in some way they rolled that into something else in order to help build up your character's ability to use their blood to boost stats. You basically do not need to max out any of your physical attributes because of Blood Buff. And finally, we move on to lasting impressions. So, the ending of the game. Now, I know in my last vampire video, I had been quite critical of the ending of the game, and I wasn't really a big fan of how it ended. So let's revisit that. What I really did like is that there was an open interpretation to what actually happened in the ending. We knew there were bombs, and we knew that Jack planted them for some reason. But there is some dialogue there that implies that there is more going on. So it's really nice to get that implication and have the fans really start to come up with their own fan theories. And what's great about that is that the devs have come out and said that they're not going to confirm or deny anything in any way to allow the fans to build their own headcanons. That's really nice, and I do appreciate that. Also, the fact that this entire game you've been seeking this the ability to open the sarcophagus that has some kind of Mesopotamian king or something inside, that is probably some old vampire that LaCroix wants to drink the blood of so he can become super powerful. The fact that that was all not really happening and Jack placed bombs inside and blew it up, I did not like that originally because I felt like it was this build up to nothing. But if you take the game as a whole, it's consistent with the subversion of the seriousness in the game. Many times we came across situations where dark humor was used to kind of step in and show how, even though things can get really dark and really brooding, that absurdity is something to be amused about sometimes. Jack helped a lot with that, and I really do appreciate some of the aspects you got from other people, like the Nosferatu are just full of dark humor. So it remains consistent, the ending I mean, remains consistent with the rest of the game, basically saying, look, we know this was very serious, and we know that you were expecting to find some kind of a terribly old vampire god-esque creature, but maybe there wasn't. LOL. I do think that's consistent, and I do appreciate that. Now, things I still don't like about the ending, I really feel like there was no real resolution to the game. Nothing actually kind of finished. It just kind of blew up. And without that resolution, I just feel like the game, like there should be more to the game. There should be a sequel that should come out to tell more about this story. They should keep going on, but there's nothing else. And I have to wonder if this was a development limitation, because I know, again, after doing research, they ran out of money, it was getting too expensive, and they just had to push the game out. So if they had more time, they had more money, would the ending have been more fleshed out? I do think it would have. Which takes us to replayability. So this one's an easy one. There are lots of clans to choose from, there are lots of endings to choose from, and there are lots of builds to choose from when you're making your character. So is it replayable? Yes. Yes, 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 yes. In fact, like, it's one of those rare games where when you finish, you just have this feeling of, man, I should go right back in there and try something else and see how it works. It works great. I love it. So that brings us to our overall impact. The game itself is glitchy and unfinished. Fans have patched it up as best as they can. They've restored some content. They've even done some of their own voiceovers, which are in there for better or for worse. It's definitely for worse. But the glitchiness of the game is still very, very difficult to handle. The good news is, despite the terrible glitchiness and the fact that a lot of things still feel unfinished despite what fans have restored and added in, the game is still unbelievably fun. Like, I still enjoyed the hell out of it. It's one of the few social-driven games out there on the market right now. There are very few games you can actually go and spend the majority of the game talking through things and working through dialogue. Some of the few are basically your BioWare games for the most part, and probably some of the more recent Canadian-based RPGs. But again, Vampire just does things so uniquely that it's not anything else out there that's quite like it, which is just amazing. Now, the downside of the fans patching it is that there are multiple groups who have worked on these patches. So there are multiple versions of these patches out there that you can work on. And I know there's just a straight unofficial patch, which they just restored some old content and fixed some things. And then there's also the Patch Plus version, which took it upon themselves to move stuff around regarding the restoration and balancing of the game in general, which is the version I played, of course. So make sure you do your research if you want to play through this game. Make sure you know what you're looking for, because I did not look that hard and I ended up with the Patch Plus version of the unofficial patch. And though it was very enjoyable, there's still a lot of inconsistencies in tone and environments where people had restored and moved things around that didn't quite make sense to the rest of the game. So, that's it for my final thoughts, guys, on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. I love this game. It was fantastic. I am definitely going to revisit it in the future. I don't know when in the channel. Like I've said before in my State of the Channel video, I'm very much looking at possibly streaming it. There's some things that have to go into effect before I will be able to stream it. And I'm probably going to take a week off from work in order to go ahead and do that. So I will stream probably just about every day in order to do that. But there are some things that still need, like for example, I still work off of one monitor. I'm fairly confident a second monitor will definitely help. So I got to get that set up, and there's some aspects of Twitch and YouTube I want to do some research on to see how exactly streaming works. But it's either that, or I will go ahead and play through again and record it and then just put it up in bits and pieces. You guys just won't see all the in-between stuff that I do as much. Maybe. I still think streaming is the right way to go. I think my wife has the right idea. Anyway, thanks so much for listening through this video. This is my final Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines video for some time, so hopefully you guys got a little bit better of an understanding as to how I enjoyed the game, as well as what aspects of the game I enjoyed and did not enjoy. So, if you don't mind, go down in the comments, let me know what I'm wrong about. Let me know what I'm right about. Let me know your own thoughts and opinions on the game itself. I would love to hear back on it. I know we got a lot of dialogue going on in the final video that I released back, what was it, probably coming up on almost a month ago now. But go ahead and let me know, what you think of the game. Let me know if there is anything you want to see me do with the game in the future. I know that I've gotten several people asking me to play through as Malkavian, and I know that Candy specifically has been really cool with the idea of a stream. So I will look into both of those things. But yeah, go ahead and let me know. I'd appreciate the feedback. And as always, guys, I hope you're having a great day. Take care, and I will catch you in our next Blind Let's Play.